Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Steve Carhart, class of 70. I'm the External Relations Chair of MFSA, and it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce our afternoon panel. The important thing to understand from this panel is that our concerns on free expression on campus are of a national nature, and we have here several representatives from the Alumni Free Speech Alliance, which is a rapidly growing group with numbers now 22 members on 22 campuses with similar concerns to those we have here at MIT and Harvard. The panel from the far end there includes Tony DelGreco, who is an engineering graduate of Cornell and from a career in building and construction, is now at Cornell, been involved in their groundbreaking Lifting the Fog report, which is perhaps the most far-reaching set of proposals made on any one campus. Next in from Tony is Jenna Robinson from the UNC Free Speech Alliance, Alumni Free Speech Alliance. Jenna is president of the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal in North Carolina, which has been working on issues of campus reform since long before many of us got involved with some of these issues. Next in is from Harvard Alumni for Free Speech is Sam Abrams. Sam is a professor of politics in sociology at Sarah Lawrence, fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and on the National Board at FIRE, and also at the NYU Stern School. So he's a very busy fellow. Glad he could be with us today. I'm sorry, I skipped Leslie. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. I did
Leslie
this.
Spencer on the other side of Sam. Leslie Spencer from the Princetonians for Free Speech. After a long career at journalism, Leslie has been involved with Yet Yingling and Stuart Taylor in founding Princetonians for Free Speech, which is one of the seminal groups that led to the formation of AFSA. And the chair of this session will be our own Chuck Davis, class of 87, whose career has been in both military and finance. And he has now moved on from being the president of MFSA to being the president of AFSA. Our loss is AFSA's gain, and he is on to bigger horizons, and he will be our moderator this afternoon. So I'll turn it over to Chuck. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for sticking through after lunch, and my apologies for drawing the short straw and having to be the person following Glenn. Some things you can't do anything about, you just have to power through it. So I want to thank our panelists coming today, because one of the most important and energizing aspects to this is simply realizing that we're not alone. I think we heard that from the Harvard Council this morning, and it's been a very illuminating thing, and we've heard from many people. I think the alumni movement is important for a particular reason, and in this new role, I've learned to try to talk in sound bites occasionally. So one of the phrases, almost like the AFSA mission statement, that kind of come down to saying that school-focused groups of involved and invested alumni are the necessary and previously missing element required for real change on university campuses. Because after all, alumni are a university's natural constituency. As was pointed out this morning, the students come and go. You have a 25% turnover every year minimum. Faculty may be a bit stickier in the metaphorical sense. And administrators definitely move, but alumni or alumni forever. So I think this is, our thesis is that these are very important groups for actually effecting change. So I'll let each person can do a bit of a more introduction to their background, but they were provided a set of questions. I think there's some basic things we really want to share, which is, to start off with, what's going on at your university? Well, we know.
Yes.
It's okay, Harvard, we know. Thanks to FIRE. But what's going on, and what are they doing to build a more open culture, or are they openly hostile? And then we can move on to sort of what are you as an organization doing in that environment. So let's go ahead and put them on the spot. Tony. Oh, I'm sorry, Sam.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be back at the Institute. I actually was both a student and then an instructor here at MIT, or the Institute as actual alums call it, and it was thrilling. One of the reasons I adored coming here was that at least 20, 25 years ago, and I feel really old saying 20 or 25 years ago, but it actually is true at this point, is that MIT to me was not about feelings or identity. It was there are problems in the world, and we need to figure out how to solve those. I loved the idea of mens et manos, mind in hand, which was what MIT was and I hope remains all about. And it wasn't what your feelings are and did you have a tough day. It's how do we solve this? How do we move forward? How do we innovate for society and make the place better? And I think that sometimes MIT has lost that. I want to publicly say that to all of the folks here at MIT doing this work, this is critical. Whether you like it or not, MIT is a globally renowned institution. What happens here matters. Leaders come from this fine institution. We have to protect speech and we have to protect open inquiry and expression. Otherwise, the great work of MIT and Harvard down the road fails, and we have to protect that. Also, stepping back for a moment, I'll just say that I've written about this mess we're in now for the last 5 or 6 years. I have about 400 articles about it. Do not read all of them. They're available at my site at AEI. And one thing to note is that this whole mess, whether it's DEI, identity politics, the silencing of speech and so on, this is not something that happened overnight. This is something that, as Professor Kaminsky talked about, this has been going on for 20 to 30 years. This is something that's been very gradual. To finally see alumni stand up and organize this way is just crucially important. But we need to, sort of temper our expectations to realize that it's going to take a little bit of time to do this and to do it right. So with Harvard as an example, and it's a pleasure to represent Harvard a little bit here, and the same thing with MIT, the HAFS has been in organization and sort of stealth mode. Since we're at MIT, we can talk about startups, sort of stealth mode for now a little while. And the reason for that is that Harvard, I like to think of as a messy octopus. There's a core, but lots of different legs and tentacles going on. We have a president, but the president doesn't necessarily run the show. The school is very diffuse, it's scattered. Many undergrads have never, for instance, been over to the medical school in that campus and are surprised to see that there's something over there. It's beautiful, by the way, and a great place to study if you need a break, and that you can use your ID to get in. And the reason I mention that is they're like little kingdoms, little fiefdoms, and deans have incredible power, influence, and control. My AFS colleague, Professor Flyer, can certainly talk about that. That's obviously not a negative, but we have a lot of moving parts, and what we've been able to do with HAFS so far is really build a community committed to promoting speech and the values of Harvard, which are truth, veritas, and we're trying to do it across a number of schools, just the way the Council on Academic Freedom is doing it. It's going to take some time. It's going to be slow. So we have some things in mind, and everyone's welcome, just as a heads up, October 12th, big online webinar, to talk about the FIRE rankings and why Harvard shaped up the way it did. We've co-sponsored a bunch of things. We've co-sponsored the DEI event here at MIT. But what I would say is this is going to be a fight that's worth fighting. It's going to be slow. We're working with the faculty. But to your point, it's nice to see alumni speak up. For years I've written about the fact that we have parents and students, we have faculty, we have administrators, but there's that other pillar, and that's alumni. And we need to be far more than just check-writing folks who come out to the Harvard-Yale football game, which is not often that exciting. The fact of the matter is...
It is when MIT gets involved.
Yes. I'd rather go to a UNC game any day on that. But the fact is that alumni are beginning to speak up, and we have to do it in a coordinated and organized way. I had some meetings yesterday with some high-level Harvard folks, casually. They know what's going on. They are aware of it. I don't know what they're going to do about it, but they certainly know that something has to change. And they're concerned. We saw the recent Supreme Court case that put Harvard and Harvard's admissions practices on in the national spotlight. They are now going to have to rethink or reconsider legacy admissions. Both of these issues are explicitly a result of alumni pressure. I know that we're going to get there, but again, it has to be slow. We're planning carefully with that. We're going to hopefully write letters shortly and start putting out white papers and deal with things like bias reporting and all this other stuff down the road. But again, I think the key thing is to say that slowly, carefully, methodically, and we'll get there. I can talk more, but I don't want to talk over Princeton and everybody else.
So I know we'll get around to everyone. Tony, Cornell recently published some fantastic material with some policy recommendations. And what was can you explain more about that and what the university's response has been?
I mean, how do we put it together, or what it includes?
What was included? What was the intent, right? Just to kind of talk about kind of the question we really want to think about is what's been your most effective event or initiative, and certainly that's a very big one recently, and it came out of the Cornell space. So.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, it was a collaborative effort of probably about 10 people from CFSA. I was a minor player in that effort. I came in toward the end. It started months ago. It started when the group found out from some professors in the university that the university was requiring DEI statements for them to, for new hires, and DEI statements for promotions, and the founders of CFSA, we just started asking what's going on over at Cornell, and what are the actual practices they're putting in place as regards to DEI, as opposed to the principles. The principles sound great when you talk about them, diversity, inclusion, they sound great, but the practices don't necessarily match the principles. So we decided we needed to present a set of policies for the school to follow that would focus on the practices. We had an attorney as one of our volunteers who did the lion's share of the work, very smart lady from Washington. She prefers to remain anonymous. So over a series of couple of months, she drafted this. We included by reference, the Chicago Principles, which is focused towards free speech, the Calvin Report, which is more focused towards the university not being taking political views, the Woodward Report, which, I'll be honest, I never finished reading it. It was so long, but I think it combines the two. And the Shills Report, which is focused on hiring practices and promotion practices for professors. So we submitted that to, at the same time, or simultaneously, the president of the university declared the academic year 23-24 is the year of free speech at Cornell, which is supposed to be a series of events. Some of them I think are going to be silly. One of them is a fashion show. We'll see what happens with that. But that put pressure on us to finish this report and get it submitted in the summer before she came out. We figured we had to get ahead of her, so we accelerated it. We submitted it, I think, middle of August. And there's been radio silence from Cornell. They have not even acknowledged receipt of this. We've asked them for meetings to discuss it, this debate within the group as to whether a meeting is necessary, but we decided to ask for a meeting, and they've ignored us with that as well. So right now it's just sitting there and it's waiting their response. So I can't say it's been successful, but it's been submitted.
Just a comment about the silliness thing, if I may. One thing I've noticed, and we've been tracking a lot of this with some of the fire data, is that mental health of our students is collapsing. Students are unhappy, stressed, so on. And coming out of the lockdowns and having so much social media stimuli from this sort of stuff, telling them what to think and how to think. I've actually personally said, let's embrace the silliness, because if it engages them, even if we get one or two ideas across, I actually kind of love that. Now, I don't want to excuse the silliness as cover for no more substance for the year. That wouldn't work. But something silly, if it helps, I know that sounds crazy, but our students are in a tough spot with all the messaging that, assuming they do a little bit more than that, some silliness is not actually the worst idea. At least we're seeing that in some of the data when we're surveying our students today, that they are miserable. So if it helps, I say why not? Just start to throw that in there.
So Jenna and Leslie, the Martin Center's been around for longer, and Princeton was maybe the original Alumni Free Speech group. So could y'all take turns to speak about some of your activities on campus recently, what the administration has been doing, and how they've been reacting to your presence?
I'm kind of wearing two hats here today. I am a board member of the UNC Alumni Free Speech Alliance, but also the president of the Martin Center. So I've been working on these issues since about 2007. My first real foray into free speech was I partnered with FIRE on a survey of all the institutions in North Carolina on their free speech rankings back in 2010. And at that point, there were no green light rankings in all of North Carolina. There were a lot of reds, a lot of yellows.
I'm sorry, can you explain to everyone what the Martin Center is?
Sure. So the James G. Martin Center is a think tank that works on higher education policy, specifically policies that can be implemented by university boards, legislatures, and administrations. We don't work a lot on federal policy. We comment on it sometimes, but we really focus on those kind of local actions that can be accomplished. And so a lot of my work is with North Carolina institutions. And as I was saying, we got into this free speech space in 2010, and years later, it has really come to fruition. In North Carolina, all but one UNC institution, and there are 16, now have green lights from FIRE, which means no unconstitutional speech policies. At UNC in particular, both the faculty and the Board of Trustees have adopted the Chicago Principles. The Board of Trustees have also adopted the Calvin Report. They adopted a voluntary civility statement that they invited other members of the community to sign on to, but not demanded. They reissued a policy reminding student government that you cannot restrict what groups you give money to based on their positions on different issues. And that came about because the student government was trying to tell other student groups that they couldn't spend money at Chick-fil-A because Chick-fil-A had the wrong opinions about the Dobbs decision. And in the South, Chick-fil-A is taken very seriously. So the Board of Trustees stepped in and reminded student government, no, you have to be neutral in the way you distribute funds among student groups. And if student groups choose to spend some of their funding to get Chick-fil-A, that's okay. You have to accept that. And then the most recent thing that the board did in terms of policy was to reaffirm a prohibition on compelled speech, which was first proposed by our Board of Governors for the whole system, and then the UNC Chapel Hill Board reaffirmed that. And what that means is that you can't compel faculty or students or contractors to make a statement on something like diversity or to affirm they're not communists or anything else in order to be hired or considered for admission. And so that's the way our board dealt with it. Instead of saying specifically you can't demand DEI statements, they said you can't compel speech about anything that is political, social, religious, the entire litany of issues you want people to be able to have free expression and freedom of conscience on. And there has also been work to try to improve the culture at UNC. There's now a program for public discourse, which got started in 2017. There's in the works a school of civic life and leadership, which is going to have a huge civil discourse component. There's a free speech or free expression faculty committee, heterodox academy faculty group, and free speech training and freshman orientation, although they do kind of phone that one in. But all told, UNC has made just amazing strides in the last, 13 years. I'll save for later talking about the cultural problems that still exist, but policy-wise, it's really, really exciting where UNC is now and the amount of work that they've been willing to do to get there.
Wow. Wow, well, just listening to that, it's sort of in a way, my first impression is a study in contrast. Princeton University, private, in many ways, less like Harvard and Yale. It's sort of like a big but very prominent liberal arts college. Leadership really matters on this issue and what the president conveys about it. We were born as an irritant to the powers that be, out of the firing of a professor, classics professor, Joshua Katz. In the same way, it was a reactive process in the same way. I think that MIT's group was sort of galvanized by the Dorian Abbott incident. small but mighty group, founders. This was before I started. Sophisticated writing, that kind of thing. A lot of pressure to elevate the controversy around the firing of Katz. Pressure before the firing happened, digging up of actual factual historical information, all that. The sort of muscle that we were able to generate to expose what was really going on. I think, of course, it failed. I mean, he was fired, but it made a difference to people's awareness. Our membership shot up in terms of just the subscribers to our newsletter and our twice weekly emails. We have very content-rich twice weekly emails. In terms of the question, your first question that was raised was, what are we doing and what works and what doesn't work? We feel like the regular ongoing communication and trying to build membership of alumni is, it's more success than it feels like while you're doing it. It's a slog, it takes work, you're communicating, you're slowly building membership, but it does work because people share this. We've had the one really, and I think it's fair to say that although we're an irritant with the administration, and we do not have official status on campus, we have built very strong relationships with student groups and faculty groups. And that really does enable you, so for instance, one of the first things we did before my time was to put 2 students on our board. And right away, you have this connection with just a couple of students, but they are delighted to be part of it. They have something on their CV about it, and they spread the word amongst their friends. The student groups and the faculty groups also enable us, because we don't have any status otherwise, to have on-campus events. It's become clear to us that having things like a Braver Angels event or a controversial speaker, even if you don't get a lot of audience, if you have a good recording system, it reverberates. The Daily Princetonian writes about it. We're suddenly a kind of a presence. So having the resources to pay people to get to campus, important people to give speeches or better debates. We've discovered that students are not interested in talks about free speech. They don't want to hear about free speech. They want to hear about controversial issues that don't get discussed on campus. They want it to be interesting and high level, and it doesn't, so talking about free speech is a bit of a yawn. The other thing we've done quite successfully is to get Freshman Week, to get the part of the program for freshmen to include a free speech. It's a really important and moves the needle to get new freshmen on campus, and during that all-important week where they're being bombarded with information, a big mandatory session is about free speech. It went very well the first year. This year, less so. We were applying probably not enough pressure. The other thing we did that was that really has had resonance in the national press as well as locally is we hired the same people who does the fire survey to do an on-campus survey of all our students on free speech questions. They helped us develop a very professional survey. We got a high participation rate. We have all kinds of interesting data and numbers about what students think and what they don't think, and what they understand about free speech and what they don't understand about free speech. And we do have a lot of info that they're very interested, but that they are also very willing to shout down speakers if they don't like them. High numbers in that way, but high numbers in, we love to hear debates. So it's a funny mixed picture, and we're going to do it every year. So that's a kind of start, if you want to.
And I guess it's interesting, you've got the information. So one of the questions for the group is, what's been your most effective initiative, right? Other than getting sued for Harvard and UNC. I didn't realize we had, I never connected the dots. We had both of those universities together here. But, and I understand you said you may be in stealth mode, but what is the most effective thing that you've done? And kind of one of the things I want to lead the discussion to is around what type of advice you ultimately then give to the MFSA.
So I want
Go ahead.
I want to actually pivot off of what you just said.
Yes.
Do this so we can hear it. So this is me speaking as both a professor and writer on this stuff as well. which is, I could not agree more. The data shows the students don't want unending lectures about what free speech is. They may not have a perfect understanding, but they have enough general principle of it. They take incredible pride in hearing divergent ideas. That's what we see over and over again. They like that. And from Professor Lowry's work at lunch, I have found, for instance, that I've been attempted cancellation on 3 separate occasions over the last decade. And the reason I bring that up is I'm a persona non grata at Sarah Lawrence. Faculty actually turn away from me like it's some clique in high school when I'm walking by. Why does this? Do I care? Not really. I live in New York. These are not my friends. Many of the faculty. But what's interesting is the students every year, hundreds try to get into my classes the same way Glenn Lowry talked about. And the data supports this, which is, the biggest advice is don't tell them about free speech, model free speech. University of Chicago is very good at this. When they have their big debates, and examples of this, they fill Rockefeller Chapel, this gorgeous chapel right on the Midway Plaisance. Same sort of thing at Sarah Lawrence when we've had debates. And I've seen these debates be incredibly effective all over the country at different institutions. Elite, less so, whatever. People want to see, I wouldn't say a fight, but a heated set of ideas, a back and forth, and I think that's what you're seeing at Princeton.
Can I ask a question on that?
I'll stop.
What we heard this morning, and we hear a lot about debates or discussion or dissension will make people feel unsafe. So how do you do that without generating that negative feelings and backlash?
Well, these are not compulsory events, right? They're not officially sponsored by the school. They're often sponsored by a group, a student group, an outside group, what have you. People are self-selecting in, and I can't protect people from being a little hurt, a little uncomfortable. I firmly believe discomfort is part of the education process. So I would say as a starting point, if we can reaffirm and model this behavior for undergraduates, graduate students are a whole other ball game, but if we can reaffirm this and start just building up a core of more and more undergrads who understand this, we can then address these other problems down the road. This does not solve the words and it make me uncomfortable problem, which is very real, but I do believe enough students do not feel that way. They're just afraid to speak and have been programmed to worry and knee-jerk to that. But I'll stop talking.
Go ahead. No, sorry.
I thought you wanted to add on to something. It's okay. Jenna, did you have a comment around?
Well, our initiative was probably the most important thing we did was to get email addresses of 50,000 alumni. We have 290,000 alumni, and there was a group that was like techie that knew how to get into Cornell's system and grab these emails until we were caught and they shut it down. So maybe MIT could help us with that. They know now. But anyway, for example, I wrote a critique of Cornell's DEI policy and sent a bunch of questions out, and we published that. It went out to the 50,000 list. 13,000 people opened up the email. Only 600 opened up the report, so that's not so great. But the fact is, the point is we have 50,000 people that we're sending this stuff out to. And I think after we were able to reach the 50,000, and all of a sudden, President Martha Pollack started, coming up with these initiatives. The student assembly wanted to vote in a trigger warning, not quite requirement, but recommendation for professors and students doing presentations, and she rejected that. And she joined this 13 university group that's going to be pushing free speech. And so that would not have happened if we didn't have the access to the email. So it sounds like it's a very mundane thing, but it's very important to be able to get out directly en masse to as many alumni as you can.
I think our most effective work, or my most effective work, has just been good old-fashioned lobbying. I go to every board of trustees meeting. I've made friends with them. I email them, call them, text them, have built those relationships over time. And in doing so, I think part of it has been that now they know that when they want to take a stand on something like adopting the Chicago principles or adopting the Calvin report, that the voices they hear from the faculty senate or from the dissenting groups on campus are not the only voices out there. There are alumni voices. There are citizens of North Carolina who, in principle, own the University of North Carolina, who are going to back them when they take a stand for free speech. And so I think doing that work has been really important, just to let decision makers know at UNC that, you know, your only constituents are not the squeaky wheels on campus who want to be illiberal and intolerant. You've got a much larger group to respond to.
Inching towards, and didn't quite say, I want to make sure I'm not putting words in my mouth, is my brother-in-law has a former dean. And the first piece of advice that he gave me was scare them. Right? He actually said, have fire sue them, scare them, because the one thing that a college administrator doesn't want to do is anything that's going to generate internal opposition. Right? You know, don't rock the boat. So, you know, the advice was make sure that they understand that there's counter pressure and that there are no more easy decisions, because people generally, and this is not a knock on administrators, this is just humanity, will take the easy decision if one is available. Right? A very rare person will not. So.
Right, so this is actually, the trustees wanted to work on these initiatives. And so I think it wasn't a matter of scaring them, it was a matter of saying, you aren't alone. You know, you've got a lot of North Carolinians, you got a lot of alumni who agree with you. So do it, and don't be afraid.
Going on from this idea of scare them and the impact, it's very clear that Princeton's administration cares a great deal about anything that impacts negatively, either in the press or in terms of alumni relations. This is why alumni are so key. So Princeton prides itself on the participation rate of their donors. Almost in everything they communicate, doesn't matter how much you give. They know they have their super big givers, but they really care that they're the highest in the country and all that. So it's down. It's down enough to worry them. It's not the money, it's the number of people who are not giving anymore. And it's very clear that one of the reasons is this issue of academic freedom, freedom of inquiry, a healthy environment for students to, you know, to be. So we found, you know, an effective, almost more effective than national press, which we have gotten good national press, is getting into the Daily Princetonian. It's a very liberal, biased paper, but we're nonpartisan and we really work hard to project that image, is to get students to write stories that are either about an event we've staged on campus or on the issue of, on some controversy that erupts. The Joshua Katz scandal got incredible coverage, very mixed in terms of point of view, but it sure did put us on the map in the consciousness of the administration. So that's just an insight as to how to be effective. Yeah.
No such thing as bad publicity.
That's right.
Probably not completely true. Did you have something?
Yes, I wanted to also piggyback off of Jenna's comment about tyranny of the minority, a nice political science word, and two Harvard profs, I think, have a new book coming out called Tyranny of the Minority, and we want to be aware of that. I mean, what I say to my students at the beginning of every class I teach is, Twitter is not real, or X is not real, whatever we're calling it. I find X, you type in X.com, a very strange thing to do. But anyway, regardless of what we're calling it here, you know, report after report after report regularly shows that the left is very loud, very well organized. Just because, you know, if you talk to lawyers, one of the fun things to do is if you're in a negotiation, you say, well, just because you're yelling at me and pounding the table doesn't make you right, it means you're weak. And they hate that when you do that in various negotiations. It's fun to kind of do to them. But the reason I mention it is just because you have a few loud students who immediately invoke, you're harming me, or this is some form of bias, or you're a racist, doesn't mean you are. And it doesn't mean there's a bias, and it doesn't mean you're a racist. So, you know, being able to support decision makers, meaning boards, what you've been doing so very powerfully in North Carolina. You know, showcasing that the alumni who understand mittens and honors, who proudly wear the brass rat, to say, look, we know what we're about. Do not let this small group scare you. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest piece of advice I would give, which is, you know, you're on the side of truth here. You know you're doing the right thing. There's no question you're doing the right thing. This is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Just because 10 to 15% the overall population is making a lot of noise and it is coordinated, and it's low-hanging fruit. These are weak arguments. These are not logical. They're not using the rigor that the rest of the institute would do when it builds boats. I remember walking through the halls, seeing those boat galleries. They're amazing. Your boat would sink if you use this type of rigor most of the time. So, have the strength to say, I hear you, but I don't accept that as true or fair. And the alumni can say, hey, we are just what what Professor Kaminsky said earlier also, alumni leave their hearts at Harvard Yard, and I presume, I guess what? Killian Court, right, which is very pretty and all of that. Wherever they leave their hearts here at MIT, same sort of thing. We're part of the zeitgeist, and we carry that and its reputation. We know what the truth is, and we support the folks here who are under that intense pressure. I had no support on my multiple cancellation attempts from my colleagues, but outside of the school was great, and that's what kept me going, and that would be the big piece of advice I would give to MIT.
The Harvard guy again.
Hi, yes, Caleb Kocha from Harvard College. So how do your alumni groups plan to support students or student groups who share similar goals and missions, and how would you like to support students who share similar goals and missions?
I can start. We've started a Student Free Speech Alliance at UNC Chapel Hill. It just got going this semester, so they were doing recruiting just a couple of days ago. And so the UNC Alumni Free Speech Alliance is supporting that group and plan to work cooperatively with that group to bring events to campus. And so that is our effort right now. As I said, it is very, very new. I think they've recruited 12 students right now because it is really, they just started last week. But we're excited about that effort and about the fact that we can collaborate with students to get access to spaces on campus to have events. And also to be able to have the kind of discussions that they want to have, to get input from students about, what kind of events do you want? Don't just listen to us. What do you want to hear?
Right. I'd just reiterate that. I'd say we treat as a priority to find ways to have real relationship with students. So there's a pre-existing so-called free speech academic freedom group on Princeton's campus, Princeton Open Campus Coalition. It's about 80 students are the members now. It's run by undergraduates, so it's not always, on task, but they're really, they're very keen to co-sponsor events, and we want to listen to them. What kinds of events that would work and then engage them in being the presenters and not just sort of being our ticket to get on campus. We also have an internship program for students, writing internship. So they apply, they get a little bit of money to write 3 stories for Princetonians for Free Speech newsletter every semester. We just started it. We had 2 last year and 5 already this year. The problem now is we don't know if we can handle much more than 5, but there's real interest. They get to put it on their resume. They like the idea of being able to write for us and not just kind of be passive. So you want ways to, constructively engage students and empower them to be a force on campus.
I can also say from MIT, where I'm on the board of MFSA, is we had a graduate student who was very active and worked diligently to create a student group. They picked their name, I don't remember what it was, but it was actually challenging here on this campus to get the requisite 3 people to sign up to start a new student group.
Students for open inquiry.
Students for open inquiry. You're a founding member?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And again, it does open up avenues on campus, but also one of the things that you can do is, it was mentioned already, is financial support to those groups. And one of the things that MFSA did is created a concerned donors fund so that people who want to donate to the university but don't want to give away the choices of how that money might be spent can donate to, knowing that the funds can only go to MIT and can only go to a program that is selected by the MFSA board of directors, so that the funds can be spent in a speech-friendly way. So you could if you want to donate to support the student group. You could channel it through there knowing that those, every dollar that you donated would go to the student inquiry, right? Open inquiry, right? So, I mean, I'm opportunistically putting in a plug for anybody that wants to support Adam. There's lots of different ways. Yes, Ashley?
So affirmative action may be dead, but all the schools are going to backdoor it and it's still going to go on. So the question is, given that the incentive structure is really not for viewpoint diversity, and given that there's incredible ideological homogeneity with faculty and students on campus, regardless of all the free speech statements you have, it doesn't change a thing if the kids all think the same way coming in anyway. So what's the opportunity to create some sort of a fellowship, a scholarship, a high profile, something with admissions to attract ideological diversity, right? You recruit athletes, you recruit first gen. If you really are gonna fix this problem, we need to somehow be able to have somebody check some sort of box that says, hey, I do think a little bit differently. And you have to be able to reward them, and you have to be able to create some sort of incentive that encourages people to say, wow, if I actually am true to myself and I do believe differently, maybe there's a space for me at some of these great schools, and they're gonna maybe make that happen.
It's a really interesting topic. One of the things I've suggested if anybody is on a board, anywhere at the board of directors, is take people seriously and take them at their word when they say they're for diversity. Say, okay, how do you measure it? What are your plans to increase your metrics along these measures of diversity? And then, this is what I would tell any board member they should be doing, and then hold them accountable so that you force them to solve that problem of homogeneity. And I think actually Carl is the president of the Cornell Free Speech Alliance, has been pointing out recently that of the three things that AFSA and AFSA members support, which is academic freedom, free speech, and viewpoint diversity may be the most important precisely because if you don't have it, it puts the other two at risk.
Also, you don't need the other two. Because
They'll come naturally.
Well, in Chicago, they have this great statement, and you ask a lot of teachers there, and like, yeah, it's not a problem because no one really has to say anything differently anyway, right? So I mean, there's like, it's sort of, it's complicated.
But you specifically were focusing on one avenue of achieving that, which is fellowships or
Just
some other
through the admissions process, like actually putting a stake in the ground and saying, diversity really is our key strength. How do we really know that we
Elon
have a
Musk can
diverse?
ask for $100 million.
Honestly,
You do more than
Honestly, that's what I think it might take is for someone who could do that to write a big enough to say the first university that says they will implement this program gets the 50 mil, the 100 mil to do this, right? And see who are the takers. Anybody know a billionaire? Give them
I think there is another way that schools are doing this too, and that is through independent centers at the universities. So like what Robbie George is doing through his
James Madison program at Princeton.
The
Yeah, but
James
he has-
Madison
there are like
program,
5 other
he's got
things,
it's
too.
the higher education,
Got it.
it's
It's not
the
just, somehow there's,
Yeah. No, he
excellence in
hasn't.
higher education, Foundation for Excellence in Higher Education, that's it. And so it's a consortium of a bunch of elite universities that have these independent centers that do attract heterodox thinkers. And at public universities, there is a movement to do independent schools of civic life or departments of civic life that are there to attract heterodox thinkers, both professors and students. I know the one that at Arizona is explicitly bipartisan, so their board is split right down the middle between Democrats and Republicans. In other places, their boards are set up differently. But I think that that is a growing movement to have these independent centers at universities that are there explicitly to attract heterodox thinkers.
So how do you spread, and I want to get everybody involved, but how do you spread that across the university? Because I've heard people comment that that's great, except that's also a tacit admission that you're giving up on the real university.
Well, I know some of them are very heavily involved in teaching general education courses. And if you want to reach students, general education courses are where it's at, right? Everybody has to take them. And so if that school is where everybody's funneled through to take their general education courses, that can really scale. And so I think that there is a way to use a kind of a small outpost at first to reach a large number of students.
Tony?
We had a debate when we were creating our policy, and we put in a requirement or recommendation for soliciting applicants from different geographical areas to maximize diversity of viewpoint, because the thinking was it's a slippery slope. Like, what are you going to get people to divulge their political opinions in the application? How are you going to, get that diversity viewpoint? But then there was a group of us who thought, well, if you're spreading your applications across the country, you're going to get, people from the Midwest or the South who don't necessarily apply to a Northeastern school to the same extent. You might get it that way, but it's, they haven't responded to our policy, but it's. I think once you start thinking about the details of how you achieve that without becoming just as bad as the racial, DEI, I think it's going to be very difficult to achieve.
Money helps, and I know that's very, very sophomoric, but many years ago, the Institute for Humane Studies would give money to faculty to host events. That was priceless to me, absolutely priceless when I was starting out. I was able to host 5, 6, in some cases 8 to 10 events with students on campus. We would actually bring in a diversity of speakers. They don't need to be, and social events, quite frankly. They don't need to be high profile all the time. There are so many smart people who have so many great things to say that in many cases I'd prefer not to necessarily have the showy person who comes in, takes the check and leaves, but someone will spend the next 3 to 4 hours with the students and really get into the weeds with them. So, earlier today it was mentioned that the Harvard Council on Academic Freedom has a donation line to it available already. Well, I would suggest MIT do the same thing. And quite frankly, for professors who want to do this, there are many of us out there who actually still want to work with students and who are willing to stay late, even with children, if it means we're having a meaningful dialogue and education experience. The big hiccup for people like me, and probably less so at MIT, but it's still, I assume, a problem, is there money to order beverages and pizza or whatever it may be? I know that sounds really trite, but I can't say Pinocchios I don't know if they deliver here, but at Harvard we always would get Pinocchios, and I don't know if they deliver this far over, but having just some money around to support our faculty across the board who want to do this, it makes a difference. And I've written many times that food is an amazing social lubricant. Students are hungry, they like free food. Have something and have a dialogue. You can do wonders with that. And again, I think that the trick here is to recognize that this is not going to be an easy fix or something that we can just change overnight or even in 6 months. It has to build up slowly and over time. And that's sort of the theme now of what I've been saying, which is baby steps will get there. But DEI and Kimberly Crenshaw didn't happen overnight. It happened over 30 years, and I watched it happen from when I was an undergrad, where we literally had Dinesh D'Souza come and Sherman Alexie in my dorm having a dialogue over dinner. That would not happen today at Stanford. But I remember there was no protest to Dinesh D'Souza, none, or to Sherman Alexie. I remember going to bed at like 1 in the morning that everyone stayed so late. Well, those were great experiences. We may not get there, but we can try to push it back.
Wayne?
Yes, so how important are the trustees and the support of the trustees? Can you make much progress without the support of trustees? And particularly for the private universities that don't have some of the more direct, influential tools that the public universities have. What can you do to influence the trustees?
I think the trustees, at least with the example of Princeton, but I feel like I'm informed about others too, they are and have carefully cultivated to be yes people to the president. They are not there to create any kind of waves. Even in closed board meetings, you would think it would be a place to really hash out these important cultural things going on campus. No, I do not think any of it takes place. I think it's all whatever, certainly Princeton, whatever he wants. And affirming him and figuring out ways to get through rough patches by supporting the president. So I think they're hopeless. I don't think there's any point in, of course, we have supporters who used to be trustees at Princeton. So in that sense, you want to be a presence in their minds, whether they're going to be openly supportive of of your alumni group now, or as soon as they finish, it makes a difference for them to understand we're here and that we're a growing alumni movement and that it matters. There may be a sort of tipping point when it matters more. But now I just don't think they're interested in playing that critical trustee role where you challenge the person who's your only real employee, which is the president.
Doug McAdam, a sociologist, I presume Glenn's not here, a good sociologist who doesn't focus on that stuff, big historian and sociologist of the Freedom Summer movements, and one of the big takeaways that I got from that is the idea is keep pushing until they can't ignore you. So,
That's right.
Yes, I completely agree. The trustees are yes people, right? You know, good luck going into Loeb House at Harvard. I've never been. I've tried to walk in just to see it. You're not allowed in. Can't imagine I'd be able to be present at any meeting. But at some point, they're going to have to respond to you if you continue to push.
Absolutely.
Students demand more.
That's
So
my point about
there's the agitation,
trustees
but in a nice way.
being the natural constituency of a university, that they will try to ignore you. They tried to ignore us. $500,000 will get their attention. Thank you, Stanton. And by the way, that was the first thing I told them when they said, "I would like to talk to you." I said, "Okay, now I know what it costs. It's something less than 500, right?" But yeah, it's just they will try to ignore you, but eventually, if you don't go away, they can't.
Right.
Part of the issue, though, is this just isn't a priority for them. They come to school for board meetings. They're highly curated events. They're not given a full, complete picture of anything. They're told everything is great. The Cornell president will come out and say, "I got this great plan. We're on it. We're going to lead." You go talk to a professor there, and they'll be like, "Oh, good luck with that," right? So, I mean, that's part of the issue. Trustees have to want to care. They have to know that there's a reason to care and there's sort of something at stake. But they're just not going to get the complete picture unless they do the work. And so part of your job, actually, is to just educate them. Give them simple things, not white papers. They won't take the time to read them. They're busy people. But, you know, there's a little bit of sort of shock and awe about, do you have any idea what's really going on your campus? You're told this, here's the reality. Get testimonials from students. You know, maybe show a video of crazy things. You've got to start to document, because there's enough stories at Harvard that could, like, sink the place, right? I mean, but again, who's going to come out and give the trustees a complete picture? They'll sort of go underground and get the PR people and they'll like, crap, this is damage control. But the vast majority of them really are so unaware, and on their list of things and tasks that are going to concern them about the university, this is pretty low.
Another question here.
Yes.
Thank you. So this is going to be a little hypothetical, but so Professor Lowry mentioned his classes have to turn people away. Sam said his classes are full. There apparently is at least some thirst among the students for this. You know, I understand the University of Texas or University of Austin has gotten off to a fairly good start, though I believe it's only really graduate level. What is to prevent a university, probably not one of the large private well-endowed universities, from actually just adopting this as their core? I'm kind of thinking like Hillsdale, but not quite exactly the same. But I mean, break out from the pack and say the whole university is going to be focused around open inquiry, this kind of stuff, and that would be very unique, I think, amongst American universities right now. Is it no one wants to be the first mover? Is it trustees? Is it they don't think the demand is there? Because enrollments are going to start shrinking as demographics change, and it's going to become a real food fight.
Well, I was going to point out that the demographics enrollment, I mean, there's what, I'll get the number wrong, I'm sure somebody here has the right number, like 300 universities or colleges going out of business every year.
Not these guys.
Right. No, this is my point. Not
You
the
guys are
people with the
getting
billion plus.
No, I didn't mean the large,
endowments,
institutions,
right.
but there's a whole tier of universities that could probably change, and that are facing financial hazard.
At some point, I honestly do believe that at some point, a president's going to go into their board and go, this is our Hail Mary to stay alive and do what you're suggesting.
Is this all being recorded and shareable?
I don't know. Wayne? Is this being recorded?
Absolutely, it's being recorded.
I'll just say casual.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
no. Then I'll just say this. No.
Are you going to make a pitch for money?
No, I'll just be, I would say that we're very lucky to be here, the folks here and the representing institutions we're sitting at, but I have been very lucky to visit a lot of schools in the last couple of years. After multiple cancellation attempts, I became somewhat of a minor celebrity. People liked to have me visit, and I liked to do it. I have a huge collection of T-shirts from all these different schools. They don't fit as well as they used to because I'm not active enough with multiple kids. But anyway, the point is, I've had a chance to meet a lot of trustees, and not to put any of them down, but they're also not necessarily of the same caliber of some of the trustees here. They don't necessarily have the background, the judgment, the acumen to be as transformational as we might want them to be. So I like what you're suggesting here, but I've met with enough folks over the years that I just don't think they have it in them. It's not that they may not want to, but they haven't had the leadership background, the vision, whatever, to make some of these shifts. I do think there'll be a few Hail Marys, absolutely, but I just think a lot of these other schools are resource poor and visionary poor, unfortunately, to make that shift. And I think it would be a great thing to do, and I think there's a marketplace for that, and we can see that there's a marketplace for that now.
And I think that's why I'm so happy that Cornell did what they did, and sort of from the get-go, before it was even done. Let Carl know I really want to leverage that, as a sort of an AFSA-wide set of principles around opening where we can go out and tell as the policymakers, if you say you believe in open inquiry and viewpoint diversity, if you value diversity, which we say is a necessary, open inquiry and freedom of speech is a necessary element for diversity, that these are the policies you should be adopting, right? And actually, and I know FIRE has, sets of principle recommendation, and I know ACTA does. I'm not necessarily looking to replicate those, but as a natural constituency, coming back to that there is room to say, to provide that leadership and step into the vacuum.
I'd also add we need something like Lorraine Powell Jobs situation, or someone who's writing huge checks because he just can, like, I'm forgetting her name, Jeff. McKenzie. Thank you, Mackenzie Bezos. Thank you. Same sort of deal. You could say, look, if you change $5 million, I mean, many of these schools it would change everything if they had a $5 million bump. So there can be some strategic activist philanthropy here. People like Ken Griffin.
Ken Griffin could have done that.
Yes. And that's why, if it's being recorded, please, that would be helpful.
For once, I'm going to be the pessimist here, because like I was saying earlier, UNC has got all its policies right. We just came out 174th on FIRE survey, because you can have perfect policies and still have a culture problem. Students still are self-censoring, conservative students more than liberal students. We still have 20% of the student body who think it's sometimes or always okay to shout down a speaker. We've got students, and a lot of the students I talk to, they're not afraid of self-censoring, or they're not afraid to say what they think. They're just too tired. They're like, this is just not worth my time. There aren't any incentives to get into the discussions that I think are fun. They're just like, I'm outnumbered 3-1. I don't feel like being the token conservative today because that's exhausting.
Right.
And so there's just not a culture that incentivizes them to have those discussions, because they don't get better grades for it. They don't get accolades from their peers for it. And so even if all the colleges adopt these policies wholesale, which I absolutely think they need to do. It's the first necessary step. There's still so much work to do to get that culture right. And it's going to take, I think, 30 years. Like, just like the DEI stuff took 30 years to trickle in, this free speech is going to take 30 years to trickle in.
That's why I like the fashion show party idea. It's something fun. No, really, they're exhausted.
No, it is.
And they're so stressed. It's crazy.
And
they
like
have
fashion, free speech will eventually come back. Ryan.
Hopefully it still fits. But in light of that perspective that this is the long haul and there's work, of course, still to be done, as great as the work is that is happening, what resources and tools have you found useful to date as this grassroots movement, and what resources and tools do you believe will be necessary or useful moving forward to carry this momentum and to make these things happen?
Well, obviously, active Braver Angels debates are an essential tool.
Can you say that one more time?
No, you go ahead.
It's true, though.
Well, we raised some money, not a tremendous amount, enough, and we hired a PR consultant who, he's much better than we could ever do on ourselves. We're a bunch of, private sector, most of us are just private sector, regular, people, and he's been able to get us into the New York Post, and he's trying the Wall Street Journal, and there's another thing, I forget what it was. So I think the university reacts to bad press or critical press very quickly. In fact, that's more powerful than the trustees.
Yeah.
And I think we're really close on time accounts. John from AFSA, give him maybe the final question.
Well, this is more a practical question, and I'll excuse Sam, but for the rest of you on the panel, how do you manage or do you see a conflict between advocating for free speech and people who are drawn to this cause because of sort of other political issues? And how do you manage that conflict? Because we find ourselves over and over again, there are people who want to have whatever, half dozen different issues, and we say, no, we're really focused on free speech. We're not going to take on, whether it's affirmative action or whether, whatever. There's a litany of these issues. So I'm just sort of curious whether you encounter that issue and how you deal with it.
We only encountered it with free speech versus DEI, and there was a little bit of debate about that, and do we really have to bring up DEI, but we came around with a consensus that the two really go together, which is the opposite of what the Cornell administration is saying. So that was the only real dispute we had about that.
I think we've just tried to keep very on message. So even if we do talk about DEI, which we do, we talk specifically about the components of DEI that are compelling people to say things or believe things that that don't allow them free expression.
That's right.
And so we're not taking on DEI as a wholesale issue. But if it's in conflict because it's mandatory training or a mandatory DEI statement or any of those things, we'll talk about it then.
Yeah.
But I think it has to be an intentional effort to stay on message, for sure.
Yeah. I just absolutely reiterate that. I'd say channeling my inner Nadine Strassen. She does 250, 270 presentations a year on college campuses and elsewhere. She does it full time now because she thinks it's so important. And everywhere she goes, she says free speech is for everybody, not just for a conservative political cause, et cetera. We did the same journey with DEI. We thought we're staying away from it. This is academic freedom and free speech. But there were so many incidences on campus where the DEI bureaucracy, the administrators, just did very specific and effective things to shut down normal academic freedom events or whatever, that it was impossible to not identify this as a problem, including the influence that the DEI bureaucracy has on the president and how he behaves, what he says in defense or not in defense of free speech. So it's impossible it's a messy area, but you have to keep clear what your central mission is and only bring it in when it is directly impacting academic freedom and free speech.
And one thing I'll add to that, Whitney, who was here earlier this morning, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, asked me at one point, when I was the president of the group here, why we were against DEI, because we're putting on this debate about whether academic DEI should be abolished. And so my response essentially was, we're not against it. It really had four components. One, we're not against it. Two, acknowledge why you might think we are. Three, we didn't pick the topic you did when you canceled Dorian Abbott. Right? And four, and if you try to indicate another topic is out of bounds for discussion, we will make sure there is a robust discussion on that topic. Right? In other words, you control that agenda, not us. Right? And so that was a way, and at that point in time, that I used to stay away from picking topics, because I kept telling her repeatedly over time that every organization has one unifying concept that defines the organization, and that ours was free speech, viewpoint diversity, academic freedom. Away from that, we expect people to have very divergent views. Now, they may or may not in practice. That's irrelevant
right? What binds us as a group is the commonality of view on that one thing that defines the group. And I think that's the message to stay on.
Has anyone done research to see the correlation between schools that have more DEI and more free speech? I mean, that's the
Yes.
issue, right? So
Yes,
like,
they
if you
have.
don't have DEI, you presumably
I don't-
have more free speech,
I
right?
can't quote the statistic, but essentially, actually, I think it was ACTA, it actually seems to be a negative correlation between DEI and at least minority achievement.
Well, but what's the free speech?
I don't know about
Yeah,
that, but
that's the
again.
question.
So Wayne,
Nobody said it?
I think, no, you're, I think we're,
Yeah, I think that's about